Hello and welcome to a new video everyone. My name is Sam. In today's video I want to talk about the topic of emotions. The topic of emotions is of course not just important to people who have interests in psychology or spirituality. Generally speaking, we all care about our emotions. We want to have fewer of the bad ones and we want to have more of the good ones. We want to feel less sad and anxious and more happy and joyful. It is quite the natural human instinct to want to do that, to want to regulate our emotional lives in this way. But of course, to people who have deep interests in spirituality, their emotions might play an even more important role. A lot of times, what gets people interested in understanding themselves and discovering their true nature in the first place is that they have a lot of strong negative emotions that they feel overwhelmed by. That's obviously a completely valid and understandable reason to become interested in a solution and therefore trying to understand your actual real being. And because of that, we can already see that there's a certain assumption at the start of the spiritual path that people go on. They assume that if they only follow this path, what will happen is that they feel less negative emotions and more positive ones. They're using their spiritual path as sort of an extension of this general human tendency to want to feel better, to have more positive emotions. And generally speaking, as I said, this is quite understandable, but as is often the case, with this path of good intentions, there's also a certain danger there. The danger here is that we don't naturally let negative emotions dissolve, but instead try to suppress them and cling to positive emotions. This is of course a behavior that is not specific to people who have a spiritual interest or an interest in meditation. Working as a psychologist, I meet people on a weekly basis who suffer greatly because they suppress their emotions. They think that anything that is labeled as a negative emotion, like sadness, anxiousness, anger, needs to be suppressed and avoided. Instead, they want to feel relaxed, free and happy. As I said, that's quite natural, but the way they go about it is quite destructive. What some people do is that they just use certain behaviors to distract themselves. If they feel something that is bothering them, for example, they might engage in some kind of reckless behavior just to be distracted from that. And what happens a lot is that they develop a problem of substance abuse. Realizing that it is quite difficult to suppress an emotion just using your own mind, they use alcohol or drugs to achieve this. In their desire to feel good and to not feel bad, they numb themselves. They use the substance, whatever it is, to regulate their emotional lives. Of course, it doesn't need to be a substance. A lot of people just, as I said, engage in destructive behavior and hope that it has the same effect. Now, for people who have interests in meditation or spirituality more broadly, it can be said that they often engage in similar types of behaviors. Of course, the way they do it is much more subtle. They won't drink a bottle of vodka, of course. What they might try to do instead is that they try to meditate their emotions away. Say they're feeling anxious, for example. They might sit down and try to be mindful of the bodily sensations they feel, the thoughts they have, in order to get rid of an emotion. There's of course nothing wrong with trying to be mindful of an emotion. The issue is consciously trying to use meditation or any other kind of spiritual tactic in order to suppress it, to make it go away, to not feel it. Their meditation and spiritual inquiry therefore is not really a pursuit to understand something about themselves or discover something about themselves. Instead, they just use it as another tool to suppress negative emotions and feel positive ones. And this behavior of so-called spiritual people is of course reinforced by the spiritual idols that we have. We have this image of the Buddha or Jesus or whoever your spiritual role model, so to say, is, as being almost always at peace, having very little negative emotion, being full of joy and almost never being afraid. And this sort of image, of course, reinforces in us the desire to be the same way. We think we also want to have this complete equanimity of never being in emotional turmoil, of always being at peace. And this is an expectation that can actually cause quite a lot of suffering. When we do feel a strong emotion, especially if it's a negative strong emotion, we might then think that this is a kind of failure. We think that our meditation or our spiritual understanding isn't effective, is somehow wrong, Because if it was correct, how could this negative emotion arise? We think that our emotional life has to be sort of a straight line that never goes up and down. There are no waves to it, there's no variability, no excitation possible. And so if we do feel strong emotions, this judgment comes in. While it is of course correct to say that real understanding of your true nature does change your emotional life, it is a mistake to have a very specific image of how your emotional life should change. So it is true to say that if the sense of being a neurotic, separate self stuck inside a body is dropped, is let go of, we might very well feel less anxious. We might not get angry as much. We might feel less sad and depressed. It is quite possible that joy will arise more naturally, that we will be emotionally more happy. And these fruits, if they grow, are great. Be happy about them. Enjoy them. That's fine. But don't make the mistake of thinking that because you have recognized something essential about what you are, that now all of a sudden your emotional life should be completely monotonous, that you should have no kind of reactivity, that scary situations shouldn't cause any fear, that a loss of a loved one shouldn't cause sadness. All these emotions can still arise quite naturally depending on the situation, but what fundamentally changes when we discover our true nature is our relationship to those emotions. We now don't have to forcefully label them as good and bad anymore, as desirable and undesirable. We can instead see them as natural expressions of the body-mind that are completely appropriate depending on the situation. And furthermore, we see that the stability, this equanimity in all situations, this permanent peace that we are looking for, is not to be found in our emotional life in of itself. This permanent peace is the essence of our true nature. It is not an emotion, it is more like the constant background that is ever present and always there. All emotions we feel simply arise in this boundless open peace, and we don't have to force it to be this way. We can recognize that this wide open, clear dimensionless space that we really are is peace by its very nature, and it allows for all emotions to happen. It doesn't discriminate against a bad emotion, and it doesn't force positive emotions into your life. It allows all of your emotions instead to arise and fall away spontaneously and naturally. And this is just a truth that is there to be recognized about yourself. It can very often be the case that as a result of this understanding of your true nature, negative emotions appear less frequently and positive ones more frequently, but you shouldn't expect this to happen or force this to happen. It's all just part of a natural flow, and you can see the beauty and the peace of your true nature shine just as much in sadness as in happiness. So in conclusion, don't have false expectations about how your emotions should change as a result of your understanding or your spiritual practice. That will take care of itself. Recognize instead that which is already free of emotion but already holds all emotions effortlessly. This is true peace. I hope you enjoyed this video and found this exploration of emotions useful. Let me know what your thoughts are about this. How has your own experience of your emotions changed through your understanding? Or how has your relationship to your emotions changed? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to stay up to date to my latest videos, also consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I will see you here next time.